who finished last.
They did.
Actually, what stats have you got? Or am I just reading stats?
No, I don't have stats.
All right, I'll let you guys talk first. So they had 4 wins for the season. They realistically lost. They had 4 wins for the season. They finished last on 10 points, Barn. You can go first.
They should have probably won about 8 games, realistically. There was a few games there that they threw away, and there was one that they were absolutely dudded in, but we won't dwell on that.
Well, no, I will. No, fuck you, I'll talk anyway. Which we all knew was going to happen, so whatever. Hello.
Get into it.
The tale of this year is they lost 5 games that they were leading in the last 5 minutes. Most of which was before Madge got fired. If they won 3 of those, Madge probably keeps his job. It might have been the worst result, the worst response to a coach sacking we've ever seen because they went downhill after that. They never. So if you look at that, they could have beaten Melbourne round 1. The Titans game, honestly, Panthers was.
They just needed Jackson Hastings, I think, for that game in particular.
Yeah, that was where they still probably should have won 2-0, or whatever it was, 4-2, whatever the fuck it was, 6-2. Panthers, they got beat by Fisher Harris in the last minute. Cowboys, they got rorted, and the Dragons, well, they're dumb shits. And then you throw in the Warriors, Dragons, Newcastle games where they were. I think we all said they were the better teams and lost. So there's you throw you throw 8 wins in there, all of a sudden they're. And I'm not saying by any means that they deserve to be because they did not, hence they lost all those games. But they were close enough, and Madge was probably getting more out of them than Kamali ever got because after that. The wheels fell off. I think their stats went from something like they were conceding 90% of their points on the edges, and it went to 90% of the points through the middle, which is a tale of the back end of that year. You look at the team that they fielded in the last round, though, they were missing, not to make excuses either, it's a weird thing because they're the fucking Tigers and they suck, but they were missing Blore, Brooks, Guildhart, Hastings, Nofaluma, Roberts, Talau, Twal, Latukamanu, Rua Natukalaru, who was Little Cheese Jr., who we had a rap on at the start of the year, amidst others, which I would have forgotten. And you throw them back in, it's a bit of a different team. The problem with the Tigers is I don't think they knew where they were heading. I don't think anyone necessarily... Now they do. I think Sheens and Benchy has a bit of an opinion. But I felt like they just didn't know where they were heading for a long time. They didn't know whether Hastings should have been 7, which he should have. They didn't know what to do with Luke Brooks, who's the big whale in the bay when you come to this team. And they had an okay forward pack that overperformed some games and didn't perform at all other games. So you throw it all together, I don't know anything after Origin I don't even consider because it was just trash. It was complete trash, and I don't, they deserve the wooden spoon at the end of the day because that's what they served up. But it's like your kids, I suppose. You always think there's better in them. But what did someone else with 2 eyes think of this, Barn?
Well, I had them finishing 13th at the start of the year. I thought that there was an upside in the halves with Dewey and Hastings, which never actually eventuated, which I have no fucking idea how they didn't put those two together as soon as it was available and just let them have a crack at it. And they never gave them a full run at it. I have no idea why it didn't happen. I expect them to finish in the bottom 4, and they did even better than that. They went and won the wooden spoon. I mentioned the halves are an absolute issue. They let Leilua go. I know he spat the dummy and didn't really want to be there after he asked for a release, but they probably would have been better if they'd kept him there. But what do you do? The front row struggled apart from Tamu, who I thought did overperform in this team. Considering it's the twilight of his career, I thought he was quite good. For a majority of the season, there's no answer there for them at the hooker at the moment, which is one of my biggest problems. Apart from
Appy
maybe
Carousel?
Next year going forward.
Yeah,
but
no,
during this season, they didn't have an answer. The biggest answer they could find was Farnaman and Brown, who they put in there and did play quite well at times. And then they ended up moving him into 13, and he still did a job. So he may end up being someone that they plug in there in the 14 position next year.
All things being equal, what would Brooks at 9 have done? Hastings,
No.
7, Dewey 6.
I don't like it.
Brooks is a 14 realistic.
He doesn't want to run the ball,
Yeah.
which is his biggest issue, always has been. He doesn't seem to enjoy contact. He doesn't seem to want any part of being in the physical collision. So at that point, you're a 6. And then even the best 6s still take the ball to the line and still commit themselves to being in the physical contest occasionally. hasn't done it. I don't know where Brooks goes, to be honest. He probably should go over to England and win a Man of Steel like Brodie Croft, because he's probably on that sort of level, to be honest. He's not an NRL player for mine, but that is what it is. I think as I said, the front row struggled. The bench is poor. You'll find through pretty much every one of these bottom 8 teams that we mentioned that the lack of depth in the forwards is a massive issue. And fitness is also a massive issue. I think the Tigers were close to one of the unfittest teams in the competition. Back 20 minutes of every game, they generally weren't the team coming home.
Well, doesn't it
the
speak for
stronger.
themselves when they lost 5 games in the last 5 minutes?
They weren't the team coming home stronger than anyone else. Stefano Ukutukumanu definitely underperformed. I know he had a lot of injuries and did not play a lot of game time, but when he was there, he was nothing like he was the bloke that was in the New South Wales development squad the year before. Tamo definitely overperformed. Offa Hengawi was their best player by an absolute mile and absolutely overperformed, and he would be in mind to be the vice-captain of this team and the forward leader for the next couple of years, and they should just sign him up, lock him in, and just get him to teach the young blokes that are coming
we
through.
should actually set a pattern. So we'll get through it all, but we'll go best player and an overperformer you've touched on. But we'll have at the end we'll have a clear.
There's a shining light in young Pole that's coming through.
Yep.
I thought he was tremendous in the games that he played when he came off the bench. As I said, Stefano underperformed. Their biggest hope are the 2 signings that they've got coming in next year, and they probably need another 4. They need a big man at the front that can play 60 minutes and a couple of depth players in their forwards.
So Oli, your immediate take on the West Tigers.
Well, it's horrible, to be honest. Like, it's one of the worst seasons in the NRL era, statistically at least, and I'll probably say based off of what we've seen on the field as well at some times. Here as well, obviously, they were close to lose some games. I had the Tigers 13th as well, which, looking back, I'm actually okay with, because 2 of the teams I had below them also ended up in the bottom 4 this year. And to be honest, I don't think we're that much better than the Tigers overall. So I'm okay with that one there. I think it's still probably around. I still sort of, I guess, in my head had them around where they sort of ended up in that sense there. Joe Offangawi was obviously their best player, consistent in terms of consistent week in, week out performing. Like you could look at a guy like Jackson Hastings, who I think on probably 2 or 3 occasions in specific games had better performances. But again, it comes down to his injury, suspension, etc. He wasn't able to get that sort of consistent run and build that consistent partnership we thought he was going to have with Adam Dewey as well, which I guess is also something that was impacted by Madge being released, because it seemed like a Madge plan for Dewey and Hastings to be the halves, and when he left, they didn't pull the trigger on it quick enough, and by the time they did, there wasn't really enough time.
Hastings
I think it was like a game. It was a game, wasn't it?
I'm pretty sure it was the game that Hastings got busted.
Yeah, but well, there you go. I think as well that's sort of also a what if as well for the Tigers, and something that they're gonna have to revisit next year, and probably gonna have to go with from the outset next year. To be honest, Hastings and Dewey, I think. But again, they're good players as well. I noticed players who were sort of on the periphery at the start of the year and sort of trying to make an impact. But that's the thing, you do want to have players in your squad on the periphery trying to make an impact and having good performances for you, but you don't necessarily want those players to be in your top 5 players consistently each week, which fair enough to them. But I think it's a reflection on the rest of the squad. Like you're looking at an overperformer, I'd say Manu Brown, definitely. We expected nothing from him coming back from England and coming back from injury this year. I think he performed out of his skin. And other players, like I'm talking about, maybe your Austin Diaz's and Pole and that coming through as well. But in the end, they ended up some of the best players for the Tigers this year, just because there wasn't enough coming out from elsewhere. I thought Taumo had a really good season as well. Probably the signing of the year, I guess you could say, though, for the Tigers was, well, you could say Brown, but also, what's his name from Newcastle? It slipped my mind. Stafford Tuller as well.
Yes.
Obviously had a great season there too, and I thought Laurie was serviceable at times, but had a couple of like really bad games as well.
Look, in terms of overperformers, underperformers, I think Tama overperformed from like expectation at him. I would sign him for another year. I'll give him one more year and
So
give him
would I.
a crack.
No.
And just they've got $3 million to spend or something now because they've just let more people go, and I think there's more to come. There seems to be really strong mail that Brooks is going, which we'll see. I would give him one more year just to give you a prop, and then you can bring in. Look, we'll touch on this year, then we'll get to next year. I thought from Stafford Tower came in as I rolled my eyes and thought, here we go, here's another one, and he overperformed massively. And I thought, who else did I have here? Well, Offengow overperformed. I thought he played almost Origin standard. He was in a team as bad as this. He was fantastic and he held his head up. I never extended him, so he's staying. So happy days. I think that's a great thing. Especially, didn't he come out of the fallout of the barbershop thing and whatever the thing with Pangai and all that sort of stuff? And he went to Sydney and I'm sure hopefully he's happy and a young family and everything else. When we talk underperformers, I suppose you have to say Luke Brooks. He's your 7. He's who he is, and he didn't perform. He had 2 good games, which we won against Para and South. And
off the back of probably Jackson Hastings.
Of being moved away from his job, And even in the back end, it was he was still kicking out in the full. It's still stuff that 180-game first grader shouldn't be doing. So that was ordinary. Oli, overs and unders. You've touched them. You've touched on them.
Very good.
And I guess lastly, before we wrap this up, let's just touch on, because we haven't really, and no recency bias because he's been away. Jackson Hastings, I think, as a Tigers fan, was a great signing. I think what he brought, I don't know the opinion people have of him, because even when he broke his foot, he was in the crowd with fans. He says all the right things. He does the right things. He seems to be a very good corporate man from that point of view, and clubman. And we saw him at Magic Round. I don't think any player tried harder at all Magic Round. When you see people in the flesh, he was one of, I think, the 4 we said, him, Reynolds, Carrigan, and someone else. And if I was him, I would be signing him up and saying, yep, you're going to be if you're not our 7, because we're getting Mitch Moses, fine, but if not, you're our 7. And running with that at least for a bit, because that looks like the immediate future. Now, to next year, which we've put off, they've got...
We don't want to go too far into next year.
No, we're going to do
Save
previews,
that,
but very quick. No, just what hope is there? I think there's hope. I think there's hope for improvement from Wooden Spoon.
I can see them being something like the Dogs this year. If they can get some pieces in there, and they need some points. Like, realistically, they need some creative players that are going to provide either offloads or some sort of a passing game to be able to get, because Hastings can cover the kicking game They haven't even signed him yet, which
is
still blows my fucking mind.
Because someone will, and that's the thing, someone will.
Well, if you're going to choose between Brooks or Hastings, I know where I'm putting my money.
I am too.
They need a roster overhaul. Half the team needs to be moved on, and then you need to bring another half the team in. But that goes back to the argument about depth in the competition, adding another team. Where are they all? Like, every team in this bottom 8, we're going to mention depth in forwards. Where are all these forwards that these teams need?
There's 6 good halfbacks in the comp.
Yeah.
And I actually, 7 if you include Hastings. Yeah. I think he could, if he's not going to be here, he could be somewhere. So, look, people bag Tigers to throw money at, but they need a circuit breaker. They're going to have $3 million to spend because they're going to move more on. I think November 1's massive for them. But I think in their heads, they need to land a Munster or a Moses.
But even if Moses comes in to play 7, Hastings should be playing 13.
100%. I agree with that. Or 6.
Yeah.
And move Dewey out. Look, Dewey
had
enough
center.
time in the shop window again at 5'8", where he's fine, but he's not going to. He's not creative. He's got the big boot. He's a less fast, slightly less talented, bigger Matt Burton is who he is, and he needs an ally there. Appy is massive for him because he puts creativity and time through the spine there if they have the right people around him, and adds 50 tackles to the middle. Getting 12 back adds another 50, so you shore up your centre. And Hastings in there, all of a sudden your centre's looking much better with Hastings, Twal.
And then you start looking to your bench rotation.
And then you get Papies. So people can... And the irony of all of it is, Madge can't sign players. He went and signed the best hooker, arguably, in the comp.
And the
best back rower in the comp. In some of our opinions, people can argue. We can all
Close
argue
enough,
that.
yeah.
But And Puppy, I think he's at best 50-50 to even be there anyway, the way it looks. So we'll see what happens there. But Appy's, I think, could be by the year next year, not in so much as getting us towards the top 8, but getting towards the top 10. You get Hastings fit and you shore up your defence. And that's when you start looking towards, okay, can you Pole's offload? Can you... Yeah. Twiled, we know, doesn't have an offload. They're losing to Alungi, who does. And they've lost to Luciano.
He was 50-50 at best anyway.
Yeah, so anyway, I think there's improvement, but a disappointing season. I would be looking to build around getting that, Cheese Junior onto the bench here after Appy, and then have Brown as your 15, and then a couple of big boppers. But any final words on the Tigers?
Oh, well, there's still a big hill to climb. I think, like, looking at Appy next year, what I would predict probably ends up happening is he becomes like a bit of a, when he's fit, a Jaden Brayley for Newcastle. Like an absolute superstar for him at hooker, putting in the effort in attack and everything, but it's not just him, it's around him as well, which is similar to Brayley at Newcastle. I think that might hurt the Tigers next year still. It's a good step in the right direction, but there's obviously still a lot that's got to be done.
Sean Blaw's a massive one for the Tigers. Hasn't been fit since he's left Penrith. We know he's got an offload.
Yeah, that one game where he smashed Nathan Brown.
Running game. He can tackle. He's a big. If they can get him fit and play the majority of the season, he's a big in.
And if you get Stefano back to
Stefano back through the middle, Pole coming up as well. But they definitely need another couple of big bodies and some depth in their forward pack.
Maybe they just need to go and get Nathan Brown.
Yeah, wouldn't fucking oath. Why not? He's going to run off the back fence. He's going to pretend to be the toughest man on the field for half the game, but he gets in there and he does his work, which is what you want out of your forwards. They've got a big fucking hill to climb, man. I would be surprised if they go any further than 12th next year.